Okay, so in this video, I want to talk to you about appointment setters. Appointment setters is something that is kind of boring now. It's kind of talked about a lot in our industry, but it's one of the huge areas and key points that I'm able to add value to a lot of the businesses. For those of you guys who aren't familiar with me, my name is Sam Sauter. Over the last 7 years, I've worked with 7, 8, multi-9-figure year businesses. Some of the biggest personal brands, biggest financial services companies have a ton of experience in this space, specifically have a ton of experience in high-ticket service-based businesses. I mean, if you are an agency owner and you're an online marketer, you know that oftentimes what we are hired to do, which is to generate leads, isn't necessarily what the business always needs. They kind of sometimes need more things or to help make them successful. And appointment setters is definitely one of those things. So I have 4x'd the return on ad spend for some businesses just by having an appointment setter in the mix, helping them work their leads. When I was just getting started and my marketing budget was very, very slim and small, I basically got very, very good at squeezing every last ounce of juice out of our lead list to make sure that every lead that we paid for through online advertising was getting touched on, getting set for a call, showing up to that call. Nobody was left behind. So there's about 6 things that you really want to consider when you're hiring an appointment setter or you or yourself are appointment setting for your own lead generation campaigns. The first thing that you want to consider with appointment setting is the technology that the reps are using. I'm still shocked by the amount of 7, 8, and multi-9-figure year companies that apply to work with us. And I get inside their business and I just see these kind of entry-level sales reps. I feel bad for them. They're using technology that is just not helping them succeed. They're essentially just cutting grass with scissors. So much wasted inefficiency by just not having better systems, better technology on their side that they can leverage. So what are examples of that? Number one is like a power dialer. So many businesses, they think about who they should call, they look around, and then they start manually dialing them. It's much better for that sales rep to have a power dialer. He can click play and dial through an entire lead list that's in a specific status. The next thing, if you want to take it to another level, is have a power dialer to where it matches the area code of the prospect that you're reaching out to. I'm a 310 area code. Anything that isn't a 310 area code or my hometown of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, I'm not going to pick up the phone. I know it's a solicitation. You can get dialers that mix and match on every single dial to match the prospect of the person you're reaching out to. The sales rep amount of time that they spend of their day in conversation is going to go up dramatically. On the technology side of things, I know this sounds really simple, but nobody does this, is having a proper CRM established. Your sales reps, if they are not having automated emails, automated text messages being sent, if the CRM is messy and dirty and leads are slipping through the cracks, they're not going to be successful. So many times they get into a business, they don't have lead segmentation set up, they don't have lead scoring set up, they don't have automated SMS follow-up, they don't have pipeline statuses, they don't have smart views. We have some other videos on this channel that talk about what are the key components in being successful in setting up a CRM, whichever third-party solution you decide to work with. But you need to have a proper CRM set up in place just because that is where the sales rep, the sales team is going to live out of every day. If it's not serving them, you're massively handicapping the lifeblood, the sales organization in your business. Okay, so now that we have the technology sorted out, your team hopefully isn't cutting the grass with scissors. They have a really good CRM power dialer set up on their side. I want to talk to you guys about the script that I'm typically using with appointment setters that we've used now in over a dozen industries, and more importantly, the thought process behind that script, which is even more important. In order to convey this concept and the thought process, I want to kind of relate this actually to a dating analogy. So when I was 17 or 18 years old, I was very curious. I was about how I was going to be successful with women in my life, and I was trying to learn how to interact with them better. Maybe you can relate with this, maybe not, but I would kind of research these pickup artists or dating coaches in the space that would kind of help you to know what to say, know what to think, how to kind of read the landscape. And what they always talked about in a dating concept, this idea of the hook point. So the hook point being is like you would approach the girl and you kind of like you give away some of your power, your status, right? You're going out of your way to approach her. And then there comes this kind of key crucial point, which is you can start speaking to her, hopefully, and you can kind of get to this point where the conversation no longer becomes you are talking to them, but they start to be coming to you. They are now invested, interested in the conversation, and it feels kind of like they're speaking to you instead of the other way around. You're no longer hitting on them. It's a conversation. We've now mutually agreed to speak together. So these kind of dating coaches always talk about how do you get to the hook point? Is the conversation hooked, so to speak? This is something that I see when I'm training appointment setters, listening to call recordings. How quickly are they able to flip it? In that first 90 seconds, they're on very thin ice. They are cold called somebody, they're kind of pissed off, they catch them at a bad time. At what point does it ever flip? Does it ever flip to the point where the prospect doesn't feel like they're being sold to? It's now more of a conversation about their business, or if it's in a B2B lead that is kind of mutual and they're both interested. How do you flip that? How do you get him to kind of start being at the hook point, so to speak, to where they're kind of now investing in the conversation? Typically, the first kind of line in any script for any industry is, hey, John, John, saw you filled out a form expressing interest in XYZ. Does that ring a bell? 90% of the time, they're going to say yes. 10 or 20% of the time, they say no. What we'll have the sales rep doing in the power dialer, they'll have their whole application listed out in front of them. So it'll say, yeah, so you wrote here that you're doing between $10,000 and $20,000 a month. You're operating in this industry. You wrote this about your application. You did this. And then the guy will 99% of the time say, oh, yeah, I remember doing that. Typically, what most appointment setters are doing is they're going right into their pitch after that. So, yeah, so we do this, we do that. Again, you're now leaning into the conversation. You want to always kind of be selling on your back foot. So the first thing I'm going to say is, John, I don't want to take too much of your time. I apologize if I'm catching you at a bad time. And that apology, that acknowledging that you've now intruded on somebody's life with this phone call and this kind of sneaky area code matching feature to get them to pick up the phone. Once you've now acknowledged that, the guy senses, okay, he's cool, he gets it, he's not going to waste my time. It's kind of reverse psychology in a way, because you're saying, hey man, I'm so sorry. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. I'm sorry if I'm bothering you. And those people go, oh no, man, no problem. You know, it's totally fine. You can say, yeah, I just didn't kind of remember filling that out. But anyway, so after that, I'll typically say something like, so anyway, John, tell me how I can be most helpful to you. What specifically were you interested in when you filled out that form? And because I've asked him specifically what he was interested when he was filling out that form, he's telling me what he is most interested in. Because as a sales professional, they're not going to trust anything that you say. As salespeople, I always see this anytime I'm training a rep. They're always trying to say something and guess what the prospect is most interested in, as opposed to letting him say it in his exact verbiage. Your job as a sales rep is not to forcibly convince somebody of something. Your job is to ask them questions that lead them to their own conclusion. Sometimes the walls will kind of just come down and they will just start investing and blabbing about your business, and that's great. Now this interaction is now hooked, and this is now an inbound conversation, and you have a great chance of converting this into appointment. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to try and tug down those threads of the communication cycle. So if he's talking a ton about lead generation, marketing, and sales as being his problems, I'm going to ask him more follow-up questions. How long have you been struggling with that? What else have you tried? And I'm basically going to keep going down that thread until it's completely exhausted, because he's already brought it up. He's interested in speaking about that. What most appointment setters do is they have this script of, oh, I need to ask him these 5 questions. They're kind of in this flow of talking about something, and then they make a 180 in the conversation. They say, well, what about this? And it feels like you're interviewing them. The conversation isn't smooth because you're switching between all these kind of like conversational threads rather than diving deep down everything. Once you feel it's exhausted, then you can kind of pivot things and say, okay, I totally understand where you're coming from on a lead generation side of things. What about on a sales side? How do you feel like your business is operating from a sales perspective? Then you go down that thread. Once you've gotten to this point where you have so much investment and you haven't really talked much, they're investing, they're talking 90% of the conversation. Once you're at that point where you kind of feel like they're now like they want an answer, they feel so understood, you've collected so much information, they are now primed and ready for your solution, because it builds up all this curiosity in their mind, like, this person understands me so well. What solution are they going to offer me? What is the pitch? Now, here's the problem where most appointment setters fail. Once they get to this point, they're all built up, aggravated the pain by asking them all these questions about their business, or maybe it's in a B2C context. They try and pitch them right then and there on their products and services. Yeah, we do this, and this, and they try and sell them. Maybe they even give them a price, give them an offer on the spot. That is not what you want to do. Your job as an appointment setter is to always sell the appointment. It is not to close the deal. You're catching somebody at a very non-opportune time. They could be in traffic. They could be on the freaking toilet. You have no clue where you called them, because remember, you outbound dialed them. Your job is to recognize how much time you have, build up a little bit of interest to sell them on that appointment. Then, once you're in that appointment, now you have an hour-long opportunity to break their beliefs, go through a proper presentation, and actually sell them on a solution. That's commonly where I see people messing up, is they mistake the two. They're selling when they really need to be selling the appointment. Now you have reached out to them, you got them excited, you say, hey John, totally understand that you're feeling this way. What's a good time for you? Do you have any time later today or tomorrow where we could kind of discuss this in greater detail? We do have a solution for you internally in the house. I don't think I'm personally qualified to help you solve that problem, but we do have somebody, Peter, he's incredibly well qualified for these reasons, and he's going to kind of walk you through the rest of the process. Does that sound fair? Okay, great. What's your calendar look like later today or tomorrow? tomorrow. Always push for that time slot because we know that same day or next day appointments are going to show up than if you book them 3 weeks in advance. Their whole life circumstance could change over a 3-week period. The show up rate's going to be very, very low. Once they've agreed to that time, they say, okay, tomorrow 4 p.m., you want to send them the calendar invite right then and there. Again, this is where the technology comes into play. You want to have a pre-locked and loaded calendar invite that directly gets sent to them. And then here's the most important part, which is you want to get them to accept that invite right then and there while you're on the phone with them. Google Calendar and Gmail and a lot of these other email service providers have changed their terms of service policies. It used to be if you sended somebody a calendar invite, regardless if they accepted it or not, or they could be a total stranger, it would show up on their calendar, remind them that they have this upcoming event. The show up rate was much, much higher. What's changed now is there's been a lot of phishers and spammers in the space that have used sending calendar invites as a way to collect information from a client for malicious intent. What Google has done now is you send them the invite and it literally looks horrible. It says like unknown invite from unknown sender, like beware if you've never had any prior correspondence with that person. So you have to basically ask him, hey, I just sent you the invite. Would you mind just checking to see if you received that? And he'll go into his invites, he'll look for it, read that sketchy headline, and then click yes, accept it. And now it's shown up on their calendar, okay? By the way, common little nuance that people mess up is when they're on the phone call setting that appointment, a lot of times what they'll say is, can you accept the calendar invite right now? And what does that sound like? It sounds like you're now placing a demand on them, like you're forcing them to accept the calendar invite. I know this sounds small, but this matters when that deal is at such a fickle kind of like you're on thin ice in that conversation to get them to show up for that appointment. So instead, what you want to say is, would you mind checking to see if you received that? Because now it kind of sounds like I'm serving you, asking to see if you received it or not for your benefit. And then once they say, yeah, let me check right now. Okay, they check and you say, yeah, I got it right here. Okay, great, awesome. Would you just mind accepting that? We'll look forward to speaking with you tomorrow at 3 p.m. And would you mind just letting me know for any reason if you need to reschedule ahead of time? Because Peter's time is really valuable. And by the way, I always want to be positioning that closer as a person of authority. It's going to help him close that deal by being seen as that way. I will always lower my status. I'll sometimes say I'm Peter's assistant because it raises his status to such a degree and helps him close that deal. A lot of times appointment setters don't want to level themselves and say assistant. A lot of times I have the word I am Peter's assistant. They don't like leveling themselves. They would rather be right than close the deal and earn their commission. So it's kind of one of those weird things. I would just make sure that reps are aware of that. So the last thing that's really important is confirming that appointment. So the morning of, I'm going to typically text the prospect from an iPhone asking them, hey man, we still good for 3 p.m. today? Or if they don't respond to that for a couple hours, I will typically call them and just say, hey man, you still good for 3 p.m.? Okay. If I don't hear back from you, I'm going to have to cancel the slot, cancel the opportunity. Depending on the volume of leads that you have coming into the business, sometimes it's better off to just forget about that lead altogether. If lead flow is a little bit more scarce in that business, then we'll have the appointment setters kind of re-follow up with them and keep power dialing them to get them back on the calendar. So now after we're going through that entire process, it's pretty easy to understand why we are able to squeeze more juice out of every lead list than a lot of times our competitors. Because candidly, there are better media buyers out there than us, but we think we're really good at pairing those two skill sets together. Okay, so now that we've talked about the thought process of appointment setting, I want to talk to you quickly about compensation. So if you're thinking about hiring an appointment setter, here's what the kind of going rates are, in my opinion. If you pay too little, they're going to churn that role very, very quickly, and you're not going to retain somebody that is good. And I think the cost of switching is a lot of times greater than the just marginal cost of you paying somebody, a couple extra $1,000. They could help them that already understands your business, that has experience, that knows the CRM, knows the tech. It's about a 7 to 10 day ramp up for these appointment setters. They're not irreplaceable. Like good sales reps are hard to come by. Appointment setters less so, but still even pay a little bit more so that you don't have to stop your business for 30 days to recruit somebody, hire, train, onboard somebody, and get them back into KPI. Okay, so anyway, let's go back to compensation models. So if it's in a B2C context, things like where they don't have to be super sophisticated, 1 to 3K a month, 2 to 4K a month base, that's kind of the going rate for that, okay? And then as far as their variable compensation goes, 3 to 5% if you want to do it on sales. You can also do it on pay per show. So every appointment that shows that's qualified, just agree based on a certain form response that what is a qualified lead beforehand. You can do it on the number of appointments it shows. I've done both models. I've done it where we pay a flat fee for every appointment that shows, and I've also done it, which is we only pay for a percentage of sales. The benefit of having an appointment setter who's paid for the amount of appointments that show up, it doesn't really make sense from a business context because they're getting paid before a deal has happened, so there's a little bit more risk from the business owner. But from a psychological and emotional standpoint, paying for when every time an appointment shows up, it's really great for the appointment setter. Like he's like, oh, I had a 5-minute conversation. Oh, just made $10. It's usually usually more than $10, but you get my point. Like having those like very, very quick reinforcement cycles, I've seen make a big boost psychologically in the appointment setter's mind when there's this kind of delayed positive feedback, setting the appointment, then waiting for 3, 4, 5 weeks sometimes, close the deal, and then receive the compensation. You want their kind of like OTE, their on-track earnings, if it's in a B2C context, to be between 3 and 5K a month. And then if it's a B2B context, then it's 5 to 9K a month is kind of the going rate for that, okay? Reason that B2B people are paid a little bit more is because they have to be more sophisticated. They have to be like business consultants. They probably, like my sales reps, need to know about marketing. They need to know about sales. They need to be able to speak to a really sophisticated business owner who's really freaking busy and can't have their time wasted. Otherwise, if he's not sophisticated and doesn't get them the information, he'll drop the ball. That lead that I paid for might just slip through the cracks and they won't show up for an appointment with me or somebody on my sales team. I always like to pay more for this role than most people are comfortable with, because it's shocking to me. People won't pay for an appointment setter, but when I insert typically the appointment setters that I've worked with, I've seen cost per show drop from $800 to $200 just by having somebody that calls those leads 4 or 5 times, uses the script that I mentioned, uses better technology, the show up rate's higher, the efficiency's higher, the close rate is even higher because they've just had such a positive experience from appointment setter to close. So anyway, that is pretty much it. Today, basically what we covered was the technology. We discovered the script. We talked about the thought process behind the script. We also talked about compensation. We talked about examples of bad appointment setters. So that is pretty much all that I have for you today. If you are running a sales team, you're running a service-based business, maybe you're running ads online, you're generating leads, and you would like to have somebody place a really high level proven person in that role to help you grow your business, then fill out your information below. If you qualify, my team will reach out. We'll schedule a call. We'll talk to you about how that process works. Either way, appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. If you thought it was valuable, subscribing would be awesome. So that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. My name is Sam Sauter. If you need anything at all, shoot me a DM, hop onto my site, schedule a call with my team. We'd be more than happy to at least point you in the right direction, even if we're not a good fit. Thanks so much for your time. Hope you're having a great day. Talk to you soon. Thanks.